Welcome back. One Bills Live from Galida Health. John Murphy, Steve Pansker in our Central Studio in Orchard Park. We're on the line now with a longtime buddy of ours, longtime contributor to the show, former Bills linebacker Lorenzo Alexander joins us. Hello, Lorenzo. Good to be with you today. How you doing? How you hanging in there?
Hi, my wife scheduled together since the kids are at home, and we were just doing outside like recess. So we was practicing a little basketball.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd want you as a homeschool guy. I think you might be a little too intense for your kids.
Yeah, I am. I think I just got on my daughter's nerve, and so I don't really care about athletic ability, but I do care about effort. And so she was kind of lazy, and that's like my pet peeve.
I got you.
Oh my gosh!
Did I read this right? You're all over the TV networks yesterday when the collective bargaining agreement was approved, but they referred you as a vice president of the NFLPA now? Did you get a bump up in rank?
No, I've been executive committee for the last 6 years, and so that's the technical term. I'm a vice president. We have 10 vice presidents, or 9 vice presidents, 1 treasurer, and then 1 president.
Let me ask you this. This is just housekeeping, but I saw last week that your term has been extended, even as a retired player. You are welcome and encouraged to serve, no?
No, that's not actually. Our Constitution allows any player that finishes a season in the current year of a election still is eligible to run for any season. So I could be a rep, I could be a EC member, but let's say we had Mark Herzlich, not Mark Herzlich. One of our guys didn't play last season, so he didn't have an opportunity to come back on. It's just how it happens. Luckily I retired in the year that we had an election, and so I still was eligible.
So it passed by a narrow margin. What were the thoughts about the executive committee? I mean, I know you guys kind of tried to steer down the middle. All of you had your opinions, but What about the vote? How'd it go?
It was a reflection of what I thought would happen based on all the conversations I had with players, rep. Just throughout the league, even the EC was a tight vote as far as how we felt about the deal. And so it was just a reflection of membership. And it's really because of the diversity of our membership that you have such a tight vote, because the deal impacts players much differently depending on if you're a first rounder, if you're undrafted, or if you're a minimum guy, high paid guy. And then amongst other things that kind of go into as far as the 17th game, and did we get enough across the board because we are playing the 17th game. So all those things were factors in people's voting, and that's why it was so tight.
Let me ask you if this was a factor, Renzo, and it may be a question that is not answerable. Did the uproar and the fallout from coronavirus, do you think that impacted some of the late voting? People said, "Oh, the economy's taking a turn for the worse here. I'm going to vote for this. I got to protect my stake here."
I'm sure it did apply for guys who decided to hold off, like myself, until the last opportunity you had to vote, as far as looking at the economy. But that was always part of the factors, because we really didn't know what was going to have the future hold, especially with people talking about a possible recession after having such a great economy over the last several months. And so that's been a factor. Obviously, that was an additional factor added in, and I'm pretty sure it swayed people to change their minds.
I wonder, without that, and such a close vote, 60-vote margin, I wonder if it would have been voted down.
Maybe. I really don't know how much of an impact it played. We did have a significant amount of membership vote early as well. And so, guys, I think we had over, maybe 1,300 votes before there was a significant talk as far as quarantining and then the stock market crashing. And so some guys couldn't change the votes, even if they maybe wanted to.
What about the uncertainty? I think most guys voted because there was so much uncertainty about, what would happen in the next 18 months before the deal ran out.
Right.
Certainly nobody was, banging their head against the wall because the last deal was so bad. But by the same token, you turn this deal down, and that opens up uncertainty about what's going to happen over the next 8 months. Are they going to pull the deal off? Are we going to have to go on strike? Are they going to lock us out? I think the fear of uncertainty, if they didn't pass this, kind of had a sway for some of these guys too, right?
Yeah, and I think that always does. I think, that's just everyday life, especially when you talk about contracts, locking certain things in. You always are trying to mitigate versus the worst case scenario. And so you take on all those factors you just talked about, look at where we're at, what we're getting, and then you try to make the best vote or best suggestion based on your own personal situation. I think guys took all those things into consideration when they made the vote.
We're live on the line with former Bills linebacker Lorenzo Alexander, executive committee member of the NFLPA. I'm going to ask you this. You may not want to answer, Lorenzo. How did you vote?
Actually, I was a guy that was a yes earlier on in the process. But as I was saying, even when I came on this show, I wanted to make sure that guys didn't pay attention to what I said, but continue to inform themselves. And I kind of take heed to my own advice. And so as we were down in Miami and kind of going through the process of we're getting this, we're giving this and this, and we got to benefits, just the way all that kind of rolled out and kind of my own personal experience, I actually got swayed to a no vote, really based on a couple of things as far as how guys in inactive AT&P will now have to have a offset in their everyday budget because of they receive Social Security. And I didn't think that was a great way to pretty much just turn our backs, in a lack of a better terms, on men that are our most vulnerable group post NFL. And obviously I'm a guy that's transitioning to that part of the deal. And so from my perspective, I didn't like the way the benefits are dealt. Some of the things I talked about, the hospital initiative that's a part of the deal, I think it's a shell of what it should be. And I know we're going to have to fight vigorously, but I didn't like where the starting point was on that, as well as the 17th game from my perspective. And so when I took a vote as a member, I really looked at where I was at, what I would think would be best for guys in my shoes. And I actually voted no, even though there are some great gains and some significant benefits to younger guys in this deal and that can really earn some money. So, again, everybody had to kind of pick where they were at and vote accordingly.
Yeah, one of the things about this, and it was early on, just before the vote, it was put that most of the young guys that are on their rookie deal were getting a significant bump, and if you project out a 17-game contract or a 17-game season for 3 or 4 years, those 3 or 4 extra games will be more than paid for by the extra base salary ups that you get from this new CBA. So the young guys who are going to be on their rookie deal, really, for them, it was a no-brainer, the 17-game
right,
and the bump in base pay, because you're asking for another, for how many years it is, 3-4 years, that's 3 or 4 extra games, but you get a 20% bump in your pay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, guys will benefit immediately, obviously, in their minimum salaries, as well as there will be kind of like an uptick over the next 3 or 4 years as far as benefits as well, and how fast you can maximize some of the benefits. And so it makes sense. And so if you look up and you're fortunate to maybe even get past that average of 3 years, and maybe you get to 5, 6, 7, you may feel like you don't have to play 8, 9, 10 because you obviously made a lot more money early in your career, and hopefully you invested it well. And then also on the benefit side, man, I'm pretty set up. And so unlike myself, where I felt like I was right there at the cusp at the end of my career trying to find financial freedom, and so I decided to play my last 3 seasons. Maybe if my minimums were significantly higher early in my career, I decided not to play those last 3 years. And that's, you look at an additional, in my case, 36 or 32 more games that I could essentially save myself if I had economic freedom earlier on based on a higher minimum. And so those are things that people look at. Hopefully, I analyzed it like that. Hopefully guys really dug deep into it and really thought it out to really think it through and not just put a yes vote because you get an additional 100,000 next year, but really understanding the long game of it, because that's how the owners think. And so you have to put your mindset in those shoes. And so hopefully they had counsel around them. I know I talked to guys in that manner. And but yes, if some goes just vote over 100,000 bump, yes.
Yeah, and the thing is, do you think because of this CBA in the future, we're going to see a lot of guys retiring like Andrew Luck? Some of these guys are just say, listen, you know what, I'm good. Will that change the game fundamentally?
I don't know if it'll change the game fundamentally. I think guys are just more aware of their health and safety, and they realize that they've achieved financial freedom, they've lived out their dream, and there's really no more reason for me to incur additional risks that's going to take away from my future, just living everyday life, away from my family. And that's what we have to continue to educate our players. So even with this increase in money, I think guys will still understand the long game. And we were going to have this, I think, I don't want to call it exodus, but shortening of careers, especially superstars, because now they're starting to weigh in what is that extra season worth when we're talking about my mental health, my physical health, in a league where I have already secured financial freedom, and lived out my dream. And so I think guys have to have a real talk with themselves as well, regardless if we had the 17 game or not, as far as, okay, we're making a lot more money than what they used to make back in the day. Guys used to have to do 2 jobs. And so they were almost in a mindset, man, I got to maximize this as long as I can, versus now I'm making a substantial amount of money to where I can retire after 7 or 8 years versus having to play 15.
We're on the line with Lorenzo Alexander. Just a couple of minutes left with Lorenzo. Lorenzo, did you feel, or do you feel, that the players were sort of rushed into voting on this deal, right? We're still a year and a half away from the expiration of the legal contract.
If you look at it from that standpoint, as far as where expiration is, are we rushed? I mean, maybe, because we're signing an early deal, but that's really to maximize the TV dollars and the leverage that we felt like the league had working with some of the networks. If we had labor peace earlier on, people can have their own opinions about that. Obviously, I'm not an expert in that field. I'm just going off of what our staff is telling us and just the economics and understanding that this coronavirus just hit. And so maybe they can't negotiate the same TV deals as they would have before. And it matters, right? And so that would have impacted it. But yeah, I mean, that's just kind of where I'm at with it.
All right, now I want to play devil's advocate. What is your gut feeling about what the owners really, really would have done had this not passed? What would have been the strategy and the timeline? You're out 2 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, you only can take them at their word, right? When it comes to it, when they voted to ratify the deal, they also voted not to talk to us until after expiration of the current deal. They also did the similar thing in the 2011 deal, where they voted to opt out and lock us out, and they did it. And so you have to kind of use historical context and whether or not you think they're going to do what they say they're going to do. There's some guys that thought that we possibly could maybe bring them back to the table earlier. But again, that's a matter of perspective, and you have to kind of use your experience and what you think based on. But I think that the owner's mindset would have drastically shifted, and we would have waited to expiration in order to do a deal. And the ramifications of that would have started immediately with possibly having a lockout or a strike. And then, so there's no benefits as far as health care, which I had to endure during the lockout in 2011. Former players' benefits would be cut. And so there was a lot of ramifications around that if you want to try to test their hand and push it. And they could. And so guys understood that. And so I think that was another reason why, as John mentioned earlier, guys possibly decided to say a yes vote to this.
Last thing I have for you, Lorenzo, because the vote was so close and because, there are good arguments on both sides, is there any indication that there will be somewhat of a split maybe between the haves and the have-nots within the NFLPA?
Well, we're constantly trying to work to obviously bring our unit together. There's always different opinions, the same thing in the locker room. How are we going to attack this team this week? What calls should we be making? But at the end of the day, when our men have spoken, it's our job as leaders to push this new deal and try to maximize as best as we can. And then also continue to work, because the CBA is a living, breathing document that can have some amendments to it. So there's some areas that hopefully we'll be able to improve along the way. But as far as leadership, we're all going to come together in this. We're still going to have our differences of opinion, but this is not going to fracture us as far as a leadership group.
Does it give you any pause or hesitation that the deal is so long?
Well, again, I'm not an economist, and so there's things on both sides. Some guys like being locked in because then you're able to weather some of the storms of the economy up and down. With the corona and the way it's having an impact on the economy, I'm not quite sure what that means. Maybe the recession happens earlier in the deal, so then you would maybe like to get out of it earlier. But I don't really have a strong enough, I guess, wisdom based or fact based to really dictate whether or not that's going to have an impact. But for me, I always like security, and some guys don't. But I like the way it's been structured.
Lorenzo, it's great talking to you. It's good. I mean, it's unfortunate circumstances, but it's good to be home this week, right? With your kids, with your family, taking care of business. I think it's fortuitous.
Yeah, especially here in Phoenix, where the weather is warm and we can actually go outside and play. I don't know if you guys are having snow or not, but we can at least go in the backyard, run around, and don't have cabin fever. So it is a blessing, and I don't mean to make light of it, but it is. I know that's some things that we just was thankful for being in a warm climate.
Absolutely, and it's not that way for everybody. Some people are really struggling with this, with their child care. Some people have to go to work, and some people are trying to work from home, and it's a hardship. So we're glad it's working out for you, and we hope it does for most of our viewers and listeners.
Thanks, Lorenzo. The check's in the mail.
I appreciate that.
Lorenzo Alexander joining us on his dime, from his home in Scottsdale, Arizona. He is the best.